Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Hey, Rebels, welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. It is a joy to have today my guest, Taylor Beal. Hello, Taylor. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I am fantastic, excited and look forward to talking to you. Taylor and I connected talking on the topic of travel, and I love her insight. I love the way she was excited about travel. That's obviously a common checkpoint with us. And we'll talk about travel. But before we get into travel, let's learn who you are, Taylor. So let's start with 3 words that describe who you are and a little bit of a backstory behind each.
Yeah. So I would 3 words that describe me, if I had to kind of narrow them down, are feisty, unapologetic, and I was going between like passionate and driven, which probably are pretty common ones you hear on your podcast, I would imagine. So just a little bit about me that kind of gives you the backstory of those is I grew up with 3 triplet brothers that were younger than me. So I've been like, the oldest sibling for my whole life. So I grew up and always wanted to be a teacher. So I've been very driven, very goal-oriented for my whole life. And then kind of accidentally fell in love with travel and just became incredibly passionate about it and started traveling whenever I could. So I think, travel is one of those things that people think they can't do often. Like it has to be this big planned out adventure and they can only do it when they have enough money to do it. And I refused to believe that. I was like, nope, I'm feisty enough. I'm going to go travel. And really the reason I chose unapologetic is because, I like to think that I speak a lot of truth through travel and through kind of who I am as an individual. So I'm a wife, I'm a mother to 2 little boys. I teach middle schoolers, so you have to be really strong to do that too.
Middle schooler.
Yeah. It's every day's an adventure, right? And then also kind of just traveling throughout all those stages of my life and refusing to allow that to be something that fell by the wayside. So.
Yeah. I'm excited you brought up the point of affordability for travel, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a time perspective.
Oh my gosh.
And one thing I tell my clients is that you always find time and money for whatever you prioritize.
Oh, yeah.
So, I recently took a big trip and people were like, but how did you make the time? And it's like, I made the time because I wanted to take the trip. If I have to go by my to-do list and everything I have to do, I will never, ever have time to travel. Right. or do anything else that I enjoy for that matter. And the same thing I think goes financially. Yeah. I don't have a well of money that I'm just digging from, but I make it a priority and I say, what's important to me, what fuels me, mm-hmm. And that's where the finances go. But if we say, well, I really want to travel, but we don't prioritize neither time nor money, it doesn't work.
No. And like you said, I think that's everything in life, but mm-hmm. we view, like, I know you speak a lot about self-care, right, too. And it's like, if you don't prioritize self-care, it's not going to happen. And it's the same thing with travel too.
Yes. And Taylor, let's talk about, when we talked about travel, well, first of all, you have to share the story about your grandma, because I am such a fan, and I'll tell you, like, we're changing this in our family. Since a few years, even when my daughter was young, we said, how about for your birthday, instead of getting your birthday or organizing a birthday party, mm-hmm. how about we spend your birthday every year in a different place?
That's amazing.
And we started that, and then she got into that age where, she had friends and she was going to birthday parties. She was like, no, Mom. She's like, I want to have a birthday party. And I was like, Bummer, I wish somebody would make that offer to me and be like, I would love to take you somewhere for your birthday every year.
Yeah.
But then we did a couple of years of birthday parties. And then she came back and she said, Mom, that offer you made, she's like, I think I'm going to take it. She's like, I want to travel. And let's share the story with your grandma, because I'm all about teaching my daughter about the value of experiences versus things.
Yeah, I'm so lucky to have people in my life that kind of embody that idea. One of them is my grandmother. So she grew up kind of in a family that didn't have the money to really be able to travel. So she started traveling as an adult and she went to Europe, fell in love with it. And she decided that for all of her grandchildren, she was going to put away a sum of money that they could use to take their first trip to Europe or wherever they wanted to go. So I am the oldest grandchild. So I kind of was the one to like, I think I'm the only one so far to take advantage of it actually, which is kind of similar to your story. But she just believes so strongly in the lessons that you can learn while you're traveling and experiencing other cultures and the memories that that'll create for you. That she just preaches that all the time. And I was like, I have to have some of that. So I think I had just turned 21 and her rule was like, you had to graduate college first and you couldn't be married. She wanted you to do it while you were single, like go live your life, have the best time. So my friend and I, we went to Europe, we hopped around to like 5 or 6 different countries. And it was the experience of a lifetime. And she jokes now, she's like, you know, I knew it was going to be money well spent, but I didn't know it was going to be money that well spent. Right. So like, that was like the catalyst for me from like one trip to, gosh, I think I started traveling to Europe like 4 or 5 times a year. Now I have a travel blog about Europe. Like it's just turned into this whole thing that she never expected, but is really just a powerful legacy of how much, you know, like the power of travel and memories and creating that for your family.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think travel changes you. It changes you how you see the world. It changes your perspective, which is why I'm so passionate. You know, I grew up in Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, and we were very limited to where we could travel because they didn't want us to travel to the West. So I grew up traveling mostly within the country. My parents actually did love to travel, so we traveled mostly within Bulgaria. And then my first big trip was actually to the United States. That was quite a trip. And then when I graduated high school, I had a friend, our neighbors, when we moved to the US, were from Brazil. So I took a trip to see her in Brazil. And then I met another friend while I was in high school. She was in college from Colombia. So I took a trip by myself and I spent 2 months, 1 month in Brazil and 1 month in Colombia. And that was such a phenomenal time, just growing up and seeing how things are different. And, you know, even moving here, I mean, the United States was a different country for me. And I do have to say, you go through that shock of why are things not done the same way, right? You just assume things are done the same way. And then you start realizing, well, I'm in their country, so I kind of need to go along with the customs and the way things are done here. But it's an adjustment and it pushes you outside of your comfort zone than what you know.
It really does. And it's such an exercise in like flexibility because there are so many things that are just out of your control, right? You know, it's not like you're traveling across the world with like your pillow or your favorite blanket or all your family to fall back on. It's kind of, you know, you're going with the flow and you're making the best of some maybe not so great situations, but you learn so many lessons and it definitely does change you. You know, like I've taken a lot of trips with students as well across across all kinds of countries. And every time I bring them back, it's like they change into these new people who are suddenly, you know, able to solve some of their own problems and, you know, see things through a different lens, which is so important. You know, you grow up in one country, you see everything one way, and then you step into a whole nother world and you're like, oh, okay, this is completely different. And it's valuable to have those different perspectives.
You know, when I took that trip so I was gone for 2 months and I arrived, my first destination was Colombia and my luggage didn't come. And it was summer in Colombia and I think winter in Brazil. So I had like summer clothes and I arrived with no clothes. And I was hoping my luggage would arrive and it did not. So I just arrived with the clothes I was wearing, which was quite an experience. And I graduated high school, so I must have been like 18-ish, somewhere there, you know, like figuring out how to, you know, furnish a closet with and all of that. So it's definitely an experience. And you said something that I wanted to comment on, and to something else that you said. I was talking to a friend and telling her, I think it should be mandatory for all of us, whether it's when we graduate high school or at some point in our life, to take a trip abroad and spend like a decent amount of time, not just a couple of days, maybe a week, maybe a month, and just be put on there, be like, here, figure it out.
I agree. I think it would be amazing. You know, I really wish that so many people don't study abroad until they're in college and then they do. And it's just like this, again, whole world opens up to them. And I wish we had more opportunities for people to do that just throughout life. You know, like I have a friend similar to kind of what you were talking about with your children, where she has decided that when they graduate 8th grade, when they graduate high school, when they graduate college, she's taking them on a trip, right? And it's like, where do you want to go? We're going there, we're figuring it out. And you just figure things out in a way you weren't able to before. And kids, they grow up so fast through it, you know, like you said, you're 18. What do? It's not like you can go home because your luggage didn't arrive. Like, you're there, you're figuring it out.
Figure it out. You got to get there somehow. So
Right.
you're going to make it happen.
Yes,
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah. Well, so you travel mostly through Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some tips that you give people for a fun, successful travel? Do you have any tips?
I have lots of tips. So the first tip I feel like I've been talking a lot about with people is don't over plan. So, you know, we come from a society where you have so much information at your fingertips, and everybody's, you know, on Facebook, like, what should I visit and where should I go eat? And how do I make this itinerary? And I don't want to miss anything. Like, there's this panic of like, I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to miss the whole thing. And I just find that that's not existent. That's not a fear that people need to have. And my tip would be just go and sure, plan things that you don't want to miss. Like, I travel a lot in Amsterdam. I write a lot about Amsterdam, and I study the Holocaust and teach about it as well. And so seeing the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam was a big deal for me. Like, I was not going there and missing that. And those tickets sell out weeks in advance, right? So sure, plan those tickets. But, you know, I think some people chart like their every step through a city. And it's like, so you never walk around and just go see things you randomly find. And a lot of times that's where, you know, you end up eating at restaurants that are terrible because you're 5 feet away from the Eiffel Tower. And it's like, of course, that's a tourist restaurant. Just walk around and don't plan things. And, you know, kind of see what you stumble upon would be one of my big tips for people. And then I think kind of similar to what you said is don't try to see everything all at once. Like, there is so much beauty outside of these main areas. And it's really easy to be like, I'm going to go to London, and then I'm going to see Paris, and then I'm going to go to Rome. And those places are great. But if you can spend some time kind of exploring those neighborhoods and getting a little bit further outside of them, that's where you really get into the culture, right? Where you see things that is like daily life and is actually, you know, not a tourist store that's like, I love Amsterdam. And you can actually taste things that are real and see real
Amsterdam. You know, that's one of the reasons why I love places where I have friends or like locals where they can to the local places, because I don't want to go to the touristy places. I mean, yes, to your point, like if I go to Paris, I'll see the Eiffel Tower, right? I think like one of my favorite things is I like to walk around, and I actually love to, if I'm by myself, I run around the city or the town or whatever, just explore and see and observe people and talk to strangers, you know, safely, obviously. And I would tell you, we just took a recent trip to Bali. And it was like 11 p.m. when we got to the hotel, and I was like, I'm just going to talk to the guy at the reception. We ended up having an hour and a half amazing conversation to where my husband came and he was like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm just getting to know him. We're like besties right now. Like, we're talking Bali and Bali culture, and you know, it's so beautiful to get to know the people, like the real people, not you know, the ones that want to show you the touristy stuff, but like the things that are on their hearts, the things that are on their soul, to truly connect to them.
Yeah, well, and they're the people that make the country or the city what it is too.
Yeah.
You know, like they are it. So that, I think it's powerful. And hearing their stories, you can't replace that. Right. It's like you said, it's not a tour guide who's coached on what to say. It's people in their real life experiences. And that's, you like sharing part of their story, right? You don't forget that. Like I'll never forget, I was touring Auschwitz once, which is like the biggest concentration camp. I was there for, you know, a Holocaust tour, and the woman that toured us around, her aunts had perished in the camp. And so it was this powerful connection that she had. And I'll never forget that. And then we saw a Holocaust survivor there. Like you don't forget those types of experiences, but you're not going to get them if you're just, you know, jumping from place to place and checking things off your list for the sake of checking them off.
And, you know, to the first point that you made about overbooking, like I'm just going to use the trip we took, you know, I had a list of things I wanted to see, but then there were sporadically. So it was like, do something, take a day off and just walk around, try out the local ice cream, get like a local coffee shop. And it's so interesting that you mentioned the planning, because if you think in the past, we didn't have the phone where we could check the Google reviews and the Google map. Is you had a map, and you know, I laugh because I have to have the map turned into the way that I'm walking, otherwise I cannot follow.
I do too.
And it's like, we'll be in the middle of Paris. I remember with my mom, I'm like, Mom, I can't figure out which way the map needs to be turned. And like you said, some part of the fun is walking into a place that might have horrible Google reviews, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
it's part of the experience. Oh, this is what sucky whatever food is, instead of the gourmet, especially like the touristy food, like I want the local stuff, the real stuff.
Yes. And also, like, I see so many people just trying to, like, in the US, right? We try to maximize every second we have. And I think that's great in some areas, but there is something to be said in other countries for slowing down and the way they live their life at a different pace. And everybody I see on Facebook is like, well, how can I get there quickly in public transportation? And my answer is always just walk. Like, you don't have to get there in 10 seconds. Just take time to walk and see what you see. And it sounds like such a simple tip or piece of advice that people are like, oh, okay, I don't really need that. But you miss so much if you're just jumping on a train to get there as fast as you can get there. So,
I do wellness retreats, and one of the suggestions that I make is put your phone away. Put your laptop away, put your phone away. And it's very interesting. The first day people are still, like checking emails, checking text. The second day, it's about half the day, they're kind of checking it. By the third day, they're like, oh, I really don't care. And by the time it's time to come back, they're like, I don't want to go back, because they've let go. And they, then they can really experience like, oh, this is what letting go is, like have people going on vacations. They're like, I'm just going to work in the morning. No, this is vacation. This is your downtime. This is your time to explore and disconnect and interconnect.
Right.
Yeah, and take the time. I'm a huge fan of walking. So if I can walk everywhere, my husband and daughter laugh. They say if Mom can make us walk to Mexico, she would.
That's not a terrible thing. I mean, hey, you get a lot of calories burned, a lot of exercise, a lot of time to think, right? Sometimes the silence is just, it's worth it.
It's totally worth it. Totally worth it. So fun. All right, Taylor, I have to ask you, what's your definition of rebellious?
So my definition of rebellious is doing things and not apologizing for them, I think. So like the way that I look at it, I think a lot about connotations, since I, work with English and schools and things like that. And I think I love that you use this word rebellious in a different way, because I think over time, rebellious has this connotation that is just so negative, right? Like that kid is so rebellious, or your toddler is often rebellious, or I can't believe that, she dares to be that rebellious. And, in my experience growing up, it really was kind of that negative thing. But for me, I would love to see the connotation around that word change to it being like, I'm speaking my truth and I don't have to apologize for it. Like whether it fits into what you think or not, I don't have to water it down. I don't have to explain myself. And it kind of means for me to doing things that aren't typical. So, like in the US, we have all these ideas and kind of all over the world of what people should be in their certain roles. So one thing I talk about a lot is I am a mom and I am a wife. And, one of my kids has just turned 1. And so I breastfed him for a whole year, and I was supposed to go to Europe before he was finished breastfeeding. And I was like, people were like, how are you going to do that? You can't go. You can't do that. I was like, yes, I am. I'm a person and I'm also a mom. Right. But it was this big rebellious idea of like, you can't possibly do that. You have to put your kids first. I'm like, but putting my kids first is also caring for myself, having self-care, taking care of who I am. And it was the first trip since COVID. Right. So it had been years since I had been abroad. And, I just made the decision to be rebellious, right? I was like, I don't have to apologize for this. I can be both of these things. I don't have to fit into, these ideas of what you think I have to be.
Yeah. And, in the example that you use, like so many times I see that, especially I think for moms, the mom's guilt.
Yes.
Somebody says if like, what do you mean you're not breastfeeding? And there's so many reasons why maybe you cannot breastfeed, right?
Right. Yeah.
That you gave. So to get that kind of extra guilt on top of that, and also to know that, like in some ways, my ways maybe of raising my daughter are unconventional, and maybe people don't agree with them, but they're different. And I think they work for me and for my family. So it's, you know, whatever is right for you and for your family.
100%. And I think there's something big to be said for this idea, you know, like you said, the mom guilt, right? If I can be a voice for one person, like I wrote about my experience pumping all over Europe, and I had friends with me who were so supportive and helpful. Like I literally have a photo of me pumping under the Eiffel Tower at night. It's like wild, right? Like moms in the wild with their breast pumps. It's insane. But like if I can get one mom, right, to feel like, okay, I can be this person and I can do that, and you can think it's unconventional, but I'm going to do it anyway, then I think that's powerful. And that's how we create women can self-care and be other things at the same time, which is important.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know if that's still the case, but I remember when I was little, I mean, women back home would breastfeed in the park, you know, they'll just cover up, and it was not looked awkwardly. It was not looked down. It was not looked as weird. It was just a natural thing that you do. So, but again, that's cultural too, right? Different cultures, even breastfeeding differently. So, and that's another great example of culturally how things are different.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Great. All right, Taylor, favorite quote or advice? You shared some advice. Any other advice you want to share, or a piece of inspiration with our listeners?
Yeah. So I had a hard time thinking about this part. Like I'm a words person. Like I read all the time. I'm super like a quote oriented person. But one thing that I think has been powerful for me, actually is my dad, his piece of advice to me. So he always taught us growing up, you never hesitate to spend money on 4 things. And I think I disagree with him on like 1 or 2 of the things, but he said health, retirement, education, and memories. And that's kind of been a really big driving force in my life, specifically the memories part, as I kind of think about travel and look to impart that on my kids. And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. I can choose to prioritize memories and travel with my kids. But if I don't, it's never going to happen, right? There's always going to be bills to pay. There's always going to be things to do. There's always going to be a new car to buy. But those memories, like seeing someone model for me that those memories are important and they're worthwhile and they're worth spending the time on, is something that I would love to share with everyone. I think if everybody realized that, it would really help people capture, the fact that time is fleeting and those memories are worth the money and the time.
Yeah. And when I think back of my memories with my parents, yes, we traveled within Bulgaria, but every summer we spent 2 weeks at the beach. Every winter we spent 1 week in the mountains. And I remember that. It was anticipated, highly anticipated time. And those are some of my best memories. We were in a little car, all of us, actually with my aunt and cousin. Now we have these big cars and we're like, it's uncomfortable. I'm like, we traveled like on top of each other. There was no AC, there was no radio, there was no phones. We sang and recited poems and had to talk to each other.
God forbid.
It was, right? It was a totally different experience, but you're right. Those are the things that I remember. Those are the things that make me smile when I think about my childhood.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the same thing. We always went camping with my grandparents, and we were in those like the little pop-up campers that had same thing, no AC. We were all right next to each other. And now I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound very I would love some air conditioning.
Right? I want to stay in the hotel next door.
Yeah, really. You guys have fun. I'll be over there. No, but it's true. You remember those for your whole life. And then you also have the photos. Now I think we didn't have the whole digital cameras and all the Google photos and everything, but now those photos live on forever. And I think that's so cool. Like I just hoard photos of memories. And
yeah, I used to, when my daughter was born, I was so organized. I used to print them and put them in albums. And
oh, wow.
I'm about 20,000 photos behind, and probably 10 years, but I will catch up one day.
I haven't even done one, so you're ahead of me. I have no baby books done. So
yes, I'm ahead of you in that aspect. I've got her covered till she's 1.5.
There you go.
10 years to go. Taylor, where can people follow you and find you and follow your journey, or even get advice if they want to travel, especially to Europe?
Yeah, so the main place you can get all the information that I share and kind of get in touch with me is through my blog. So my blog is called Traverse with Taylor. So I'm owner and author of that. You can find me at traversewithtaylor.com. I also am on like all the main social media channels. So Instagram, same thing, TikToks, Facebook. I'm all over. And then my email and everything, contact information is linked on my blog. And I love helping people plan their trips to Europe. So happy to help. And yeah, there's some good tips on there.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, I am so grateful for your time. I wish you continued success and continuous adventure traveling around the world. Thank you for sharing those we do. I'm sure we'll stay in touch and keep seeing where the world takes you and where it takes me and where it takes our listeners. And you rebels, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, make sure to share those below. And of course, follow us. Make sure to tune in next time. Meanwhile, make it a rebellious day. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your friends.